Good evening, everybody. My name is Willi Zwozdesky. I'm the Executive Director of the British Columbia Choral Federation, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our second virtual town hall meeting. On behalf of the BCCF, I would like to acknowledge with gratitude that we live, work, and sing on the traditional and largely unceded territories of nearly 200 Indigenous nations whose rich cultural heritage surrounds us every day. We would also like to thank the University of Victoria through the offices of Dr. Adam Kahn for providing the Zoom access for these town hall sessions. The purpose of the town halls is to create a forum for sharing information about topics of concern to the choral community, singers, leaders, teachers, administrators, all of us. About 2 weeks ago, we did our first one, which is still posted online if you're interested. It was with Dr. Michael Schwant, one of the health officers in the province, and it was on the science of the coronavirus and singing specifically. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the page on the BCCF website, you can listen to a recording of that. This evening, the purpose of our session is to discuss the emotional impact on the choral community of the COVID-19 pandemic, the shock of the sudden cancellations, the losses of our circles of fellow choristers, and of course, the uncertainty of what lies ahead. So I'll be joined this evening by my colleague, Sandra Meister, and we have two presenters as well. Rick Berg is a thanatologist, a bereavement counselor, an ordained minister, an author, and workshop leader. Trained in narrative therapy, he engages his clients through story, helping them to make meaning of their loss as they discover new chapters of life in the midst of their transition. He has published 5 books in the area of grief, mourning, and meaning making. In addition to his writing, he leads workshops for professionals and volunteer organizations across North America and has just launched his 5-module online course entitled Grief Start. He hosts an online weekly radio show called It's All About the Story. He is also the executive director of Voices in Motion, and sings in 3 of those choirs every week. You can find out more about him, of course, by just dialing up rickberg.com. Erica Phare-Bergh, who is also a presenter this evening, is the artistic director of Voices in Motion, an intergenerational choir for those with memory loss, their caregivers, students, and friends. There are currently 6 of these choirs in the Greater Victoria area. She also directs the Vancouver Island Chamber Choir and has recently been appointed as the new conductor of the Newcomb Singers. Erica completed graduate studies at McGill University in Montreal and was active conducting choirs there until moving to Alberta in 2010. Fortunately for us in British Columbia, the wind blows westerly, and it blew Erica to us recently. She is in demand as an adjudicator and presenter, and of course, many of us know her through her published arrangements. And through all of this, she finds time to direct music at the Church of Our Lord in downtown Victoria. So those are our presenters, and now I want to introduce you to my co-host for this evening. It is Sandra Meister. Sandra is no stranger to the choral landscape in British Columbia. Through her work as a conductor, as a clinician, school principal, and mentor, she has infused choral music into the lives of thousands of choral singers. Sandra heads up the BC Choral Federation's Choral da Capo Chorus, which is sadly on hold this summer because of the pandemic, but is planned for October, and is a member of the BCCF Willan Council. She is looking forward to the day when we will sing together safely, and in the meantime is enjoying creating delicious meals and going for lots of walks with her husband Ross and their golden doodle, I don't know what that is, puppy Daisy. So Sandra, please join us in this conversation.
Welcome everyone. 5 minutes ago, I took off my apron after preparing the 84th consecutive home-cooked dinner in my kitchen. That is unheard of for a musician. Nothing that was continues to be. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We're so glad that you've joined us. Our plan for the next hour is to have a conversation about a crucial and sometimes really difficult topic, We're going to take a look at the recent past, where we are now today on the 2nd of June, and then look through that fog that we're referring to as the future, and that glorious day that will arrive when we will sing again together. So the past, first week of March, wow. We were going to choir, we were going to music festivals, we were practicing, we were doing all those things that we've taken for granted in the choral world for decades. Those things that bring us joy and moderate amounts of annoyance at times as well. But our world all of a sudden by the middle of March was just gone. And the range of emotions that I experienced just in conversation with my friends and colleagues was just all over the map. There was the disbelief, there was the anger, there was me that said, well, you know, the kids will go back to school after spring break. This won't last that long. And then came the despair and some pretty profound sorrow. That abrupt halt to that which we just treasure so dearly has created a really new and a pretty frightening experience for most of us. So Rick, we are so lucky and so grateful that you and your amazing expertise are here in this very timely fashion for those of us who are floundering about often. So can you tell us a little bit about what happens to us as humans when we grieve?
A lot. I mean, it's an amazing, complicated thing that's called grief. But I want to start by talking a little bit about stress. Because any type of transition that we go through that's new in our lives, any type of loss experience, we'll experience stress at some level. Different intensities, but there'll always be stress that we'll need to be aware of when we go through a loss. Certainly we're at a time of loss in our lives as a result of COVID-19. And we go through this stress, something amazing happens actually, and it's actually a beautiful thing in one way because we have this stress hormone called cortisol, which actually activates when we're under stress to protect us from further harm. The challenge is, however, that sometimes if this cortisol level rises to extreme conditions, it can actually harm us and hurt us. And so it's really important that we understand the role of stress within every type of loss experience. And I just want to give you a quick example of this because I think it's really important because this cortisol really is important for us to understand because it provides fuel for us in what is known as a fight or flight instinct that we have to something that's harming us or potentially creating loss experiences within our lives. So just imagine for a moment that your friend says to you, I want you to go on this hike. I found this great new hike up in the forest and you got to go there. You're just going to love it. It's amazing. And so you head on this hike and there's a path to go and it's a path that directs you around the bend to get back where you started. But you have this amazing experience as you walk along. And you kind of forget where the path is because you see another path and you take off on that path. You don't even think. You miss the sign that points you in the right direction. And then you go on another turn and you take another path. And all of a sudden you realize that you're lost. Stress. You're frightened, you're scared. What happens? Well, we know our blood pressure will rise. We know that our hands begin to moisten up. We learn that we become confused a little bit. We're scared, we're frightened. We think of all kinds of things in our lives that might happen. We're thinking, will I get out of here? Am I lost? I mean, will I die? You know, the sounds around us become very, very clear to us. And we're stressed out. And as soon as that happens in our lives, the cortisol kicks in and is protecting us from harm. So we go down the path and we're worried and we wonder what's going to happen next. And finally in the distance, we see somebody. Our heartbeat changes. The stress leaves us. The threat that is once part of our life, the loss, is no longer there. Well, the same thing happens when we're grieving the loss in our lives. We go through the stress. The difficulty about this, however, is elevated stress. Stress that you can't go through, that still remains a part of your life that you need to do something about. And certainly COVID is bringing all kinds of different types of stresses as a result of the numerous losses that we're experiencing. So we have to be aware, first of all, in grief, there is stress. We're going to learn some strategies a little bit later on how to reduce the stress in our lives to have some kind of normal life again as we work through this.
Is there anything even more specific about the kind of grief stress experience that we're all having because of COVID.
Oh
That makes
boy.
it really unique.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a, from a thanatology point of view, it's a fascinating study because how many here have gone through a pandemic before? So it's all new. It's a new experience for all of us. And so we're trying to figure out this new experience that we have no experience with. We haven't done it before. And so it's really interesting for me as a thanatologist because what I'm experiencing, Sandra, is a couple of things that are really important here in the grief world. This could be classified as a sudden loss. We've had no preparation. One day we have this wonderful life. We're singing together, for example, or we're just working, kids are going to school, and all of a sudden, boom. It's like things change overnight. And it's difficult because sudden losses, there's no preparation. We can't do anything about it. So it's in our lives now. And not only do we have sudden loss, but we're experiencing COVID-19 multiple loss, numerous types of losses that we perhaps haven't experienced before. And so what happens is all these losses, they get heavy upon us. And there's a term called allostatic load in the whole stress world where the stress becomes too much for us. And so we're trying to figure out how do I manage all these different kinds of losses that are happening in my life that perhaps maybe I've never experienced previously or are now experiencing at some type of different level. The third thing that's fascinating for me is that I'm almost feeling that this could be traumatic loss for some individuals. It's taking away something very important in their life in so many ways. So it's become kind of a traumatic loss experience for many people. So these three factors are huge. Now there's all kinds of different reactions we have as a result of these losses that we're going through. And I'd like to just share with you these because I think it's important for our listeners to understand the different types of reactions. Willi mentioned, the emotional reaction that we go through as a result of the loss experience, but that's just one reaction. That's just one reaction to grief, an important one, but it's the one usually that we see up front. The anger, the frustration, the sadness, the shock. Those are expressed very easily by individuals. We see them in front of us. And again, just let me again verify that this is people grieve differently. And whether you're an adult or a teenager or a child, there's going to be different ways that people respond and react to these losses. So it's important to understand those differences. But all of them will have these reactions. So kids are going to have an emotional reaction. They may not express it the same way we do, but it's going to be part of their life. But also we're going to have different other kinds of reactions as well. Relational reactions are huge during COVID-19. Relationships are changing as a result of COVID-19, sometimes to the good and sometimes to the bad. I mean, people are missing one another, first of all, so we don't have a relationship with those individuals who are important to us. But also what I'm finding in my grief practice, I'm finding that people are coming in because they're not sure how to relate to one another sometimes because of COVID. Here, for example, if you're married and if you have a partner, you work your days together or days separately. You come home for 2 hours in the evening, maybe spend weekends together, but all of a sudden now it's like full on being together. And people are going, I don't know how to do this. It's so different for me. Or, the kids usually go to school and all of a sudden it's like us together and our families. And people are wondering, well, how do I sort through this? Is a different type of experience I've never had before. Now, again, sometimes some good can come of that, but also reading statistically that there's some very difficult challenges coming out of this as well. So we can have a relational reaction to grief. We can have a physical reaction to grief as well. And what I mean by that is sometimes grief has the impact of us on our health. Our bodies are impacted by grief as well. And so we need to be aware of what's happening within our bodies. I mean, also try to get a doctor to go to if you have a health problem now. Maybe you'll get a phone call. So that alone brings stress upon our lives. So we have that reaction. Then we'll have behavioral reactions. Sometimes grief brings about behaviors that are kind of challenging for people. They haven't done something they've done previously and they're wondering what's going on here. And this is really difficult because sometimes we don't actually recognize our behavioral changes, and that's where a good friend or someone in our life needs to say, look, you're doing some things here that you might want to consider. They might be impacting you in a way that's not healthy. So we can have these behavioral reactions in grief as well. And then we can have spiritual reactions or existential reactions, the bigger picture. I mean, I'm finding it fascinating how many people are coming to talk to me about deeper things, where they're saying, you know what, I'm not sure if I want to go back to my job. I mean, I'm thinking that maybe I'd like to spend more time with my family. I'm not sure what I'm doing is actually bringing me purpose and meaning. They're thinking deeper about things from a level as a result of COVID-19, which I kind of like because it's good to think deep, but it's a reaction to grief. And the last one, of course, is the cognitive reaction, which I kind of mentioned at the onset. There is such a thing as fuzzy brain during grief. We're not clear always in our thoughts. And, I know that all of us are being kept up at night with things that are going over and over again in our mind, things that are on our mind at the top of our mind that we kind of can't let go of it. It's just worry or anxiety. So all those reactions, Sandra, cause a reaction to grief, which results in some type of stress that's happening in our life. All of these are part of normal grief experiences, but I see them elevated actually during COVID-19 because we have no experience with this thing.
It's so unknown. And Rick and Erica, one of the things that we've done on behalf of the Choral Federation to guide our conversation this evening was to invite questions and comments from all of the people all over the province who are joining us this evening. So just so somebody at home might go, hey, that was my question. Yes, we really tried to work in all of the voices from all of the different realities that make up this great province of choral singing. So one of the things that I think would be helpful for people that to take back to their choirs is, Rick, could you give us some sort of a definition of grief that we could use specifically to apply to our choral communities in this specific time?
I mean, the definitions I'm going to give you can be used in any type of experience, but I think we're going to apply it tonight to the choral experience and to the community. Two definitions that I want to share with you that I think are important. Grief is your reaction to what you miss that you no longer have that used to be. Grief is your reaction to what you miss that you no longer have that used to be. You're missing something in your life that was important, that was significant, that was special to you, and you're missing it greatly, and that's causing grief in your life. The other definition that's really powerful, however, is this one. Grief is your reaction to what you miss that you never had but always hoped for. Let me say that again. Grief is your reaction to what you miss that you never had but always hoped for. Now think about that. All the things that were going to happen, the last couple of months, the concerts, the parties, the celebrations, all those things that you'd hoped were going to happen are no longer going to. And so you're grieving those as well. So what was that you were used to, what you couldn't experience. And there's a third one, which I'm hearing over and over again in the choral world. And this applies to a concept called anticipatory grief. And anticipatory grief is very powerful because it's a grief reaction over something that hasn't happened yet, but you think that it might happen. So when you think about that, you think about all the people who are wondering what will the fall look like. They're saying, well, what if it doesn't happen? They're already grieving that it's not going to happen in a sense, and so they're moving ahead into this anticipatory grief. It's a loss that's very difficult to manage because you're already grieving something that hasn't happened yet. And so those three different types of grief reactions or definitions are part of the choral community in some way or another, for sure.
Yeah, and that's just so helpful for all of us because we're confused because we don't know we don't know what we're doing, and as you said, none of us have lived through an experience like that before. So that was really helpful. It gave us kind of that look back about very recent history, but it sure feels like it's been a long time since I had my hair done. And then we come, traveling down, and here we are on the 2nd of June. And it's been almost 3 months since we've seen 3-dimensional choir people and sung with them.
Yeah.
And then it's the calendar. We kind of go along thinking, this is okay. I like eating dinner at home, and I do love to cook. And then it's like, oh, that's supposed to be the dress rehearsal tonight. Oh, that was supposed to be Core Fest. And in grade 12, and that was my high school trip with Mrs. Roberts to Finland at spring break. And especially kids don't get a do-over. Yeah. Especially kids don't get a do-over. And then, I guess I don't need to make the cake for the party at Barb's because we're not going to Barb's. So if you put on your chorister hat, Rick, what do you think people who sing in choirs are missing most these days?
Yeah. Such a great question, Sandra. I mean, taking off my grief hat here and just a normal everyday chorister who sings. You know what I really miss? I really miss Bob. And I really miss Ralph, and I really miss Barry, and I really miss Brown. I really miss laughter. I really miss hugs and smiles. I really miss those moments, when you're in rehearsal and, the harmony comes together. And the back row where I sit, the guys always high-five each other, and we say to each other, we nailed that. We just nailed that. That celebration of doing something together. So I really miss those types of little things in my life. But I guess, I think like all of us, we miss community. I mean, I just miss being together. But there's something very powerful for me because I've examined this very deeply to what I miss in preparation for this webinar. And I want to go deeper because I think all of us miss community, but I think there's something else perhaps that all of us might be missing that we need to draw attention to. And that again kind of flows back into the whole grief world. Whenever you have a loss of any kind, there's an identity crisis. There really is. Because it's, who am I now without this thing in my life? Who am I now without this person in my life? Who am I now without this choir in my life? And what I find in my life is that choir has become part of my identity. It's who I am. I sing in 4 choirs. So this is part of who I am. And I think people who are involved in choir, choristers, they're so passionate, they're so proud. It's like, you can't get them away from this. It's what they do. They're committed to this. And so all of a sudden, just think about taking that out of their life. It's an identity challenge for them. They brag about it to their families. They're inviting their family and friends to the choral concert that they're going to be part of. It's part of who they are, and it's taken away from them. And I've discovered that in my life, and that makes me really sad. To take away that thing that is so significant to me, that gives me purpose and meaning and joy. And the other thing that I think is really important within that community, with us as individual choristers, at least for me, is, we have a sense in life that we want to contribute. We want to make a difference. And this is kind of the meaning and purpose idea of life. But I think I'm kind of sad that I can't contribute the way that I'd hope to, because, we work so hard, getting together the repertoire and to finish off the pieces. And all of a sudden, I can't show what I've done. I can't show what we've done together. And I want to contribute. Music is such a beautiful way of showing somebody what you've done and bringing joy into their lives again. And this is what we do as choir. And so those two things have been a huge missing part of my life. Who am I without choir? And the lack of being able to contribute to something that it can be offered to somebody that can make them joyful and happy. So that's what I've really kind of noticed for my life as a chorister. And I think I'm hearing this from some of my chorister friends and buddies as well.
And I think you've probably got a couple hundred people around the province going, yeah. And the identity piece, I hadn't thought of that from that angle at all. That was really helpful. Just that who we are And sometimes, we see a sea of matching outfits, but each one of those beings
Yeah.
is there because they want to communicate as a part of that collective voice, and it's pretty powerful. Erica, hi.
Hi, Sandra.
Would you please pop on your choral conductor hat? And
Perfect.
so we heard Rick talk about what does it feel like this weird time we're living in, from one of the guys in the back row, who I'm sure you have to give the evil eye to occasionally.
All the time. Yeah.
But what does it feel like to be the woman on the podium?
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting because I think it's the same issues, but it just, as you say, it's just a different angle of the same issues. So the things that I'm missing also as a conductor, and I'm sure that others are as well, is the community and the in-person, as you say, the three-dimensional community that we have, and that connection, and the sense of identity. Those two things are absolutely the same, but it looks a little different for a conductor, because as conductors, we do wear a ton of hats. We are not just, we're musicians, we are, vocal coaches, music historians, music theorists, psychologists, motivators. We have a lot of hats that we have to wear. And I think the challenge right now in our sense of identity is, which hat do I wear right now in this season? It can't be the music hat, really. A little bit it can be if you're looking at preparing, music hopefully for the fall, but you have to wear a different hat. So which season, maybe the social convener hat, or the psychologist hat, or the motivational hat comes to the fore here, and the innovator's hat, because you have to think of different things. You can't just go with what you've always done. And the music, which is the first love that brings us to choral music, right, is the thing that has to take the back burner. So that's a big loss right now for all of us, and we have to learn to reinvent ourselves and adapt for a season. So I guess the question is, who am I if I'm not conducting right now, if I'm not really conducting choirs? And we can say we're conducting choirs, but we're conducting a screen, and we hope that the people on the other side of the screen are singing along with us with their sound muted and everything. But
especially those boys in the back row,
right? Especially the boys in the back, always. Always. And then they turn the video camera off, so that's like totally but and I think the thing is too that choral music for a conductor has always kind of regulated our lives. We know that this is okay. So in May and June, we're looking at repertoire for the fall, and in the summer, we're preparing it, and we're, whatever, we're getting ready for that, ordering music, and, in the fall, we're rehearsing, we're auditioning, we're, so all these different things in the concert season. So it regulates our life. But what do we do now? So this is a big loss. And I think I'd be remiss too if I didn't say that, income is we start wondering, like, well, are we going to be conductors again? Are choirs going to continue? Now, I'm putting up the worst case scenario when I say this in terms of losses, and this is the anticipatory loss, right? But we get fearful about a possible loss of income, if we're full-time conductors. So these are all things that we're concerned about. Now, I don't happen to think that choirs are, plagues have come and gone, and the Spanish flu happened, and choirs will continue to happen. There's no doubt. It's just the season that we're in right now. I think the people that are maybe experiencing the worst loss right now are our teachers, because of the huge unknown with their students. They have to keep teaching, but how do you do that with 6 kids in a classroom or whatever? So hats off to the uncertainty that our teachers, our music teachers and choral conductors in schools are experiencing right now. I think we have to really reach out to them especially. But so the loss of identity for sure, and it looks different because what hat are we going to wear right now?
Yeah, and thanks for mentioning too the teacher voice, and just the whole thing of kids have to sign up for courses, and what are you registering for? In fact, my kitchen window faces the pathway between a lovely park and a little tiny elementary school. And I noticed yesterday and today they were walking, and I gotta say, those kindergarten kids were doing a very good job of keeping their distance in the line until the teacher stopped, and then they went, as 5-year-olds did. But then today, I thought, I guess I must always wash dishes when it's recess. And over they were going, and I thought, oh, but today they got it. So, I mean, children are hugely resilient. It's the fear and all the uncertainty. I think as you said, it'll be greater for the teacher than it will be for kids as they adapt and figure themselves. Mm-hmm. So, Rick, this is a question for you. Can you explain what you think the most challenging aspect of grief that COVID has brought to people's lives and to the choral community specifically?
I think it's fear of the unknown. I think that's a huge part of our thinking right now, and we spend a lot of time into the future. We focus on the future that's uncertain and unpredictable. And I hear it over and over again, not only in the choral world, but whatever grief experience I'm in counseling people are really focused on the future. And in terms of, healthy grief transition, we need to be very careful of this. Let me just pull an example of, I think it's appropriate. Somebody dies, and you're grieving the loss of somebody special in your life. There's 3 zones, I call it, that we can spend our time in our grief: the past, the present, or the future. When people are grieving the loss of somebody special in their life, the majority of time, for sure at the onset, is spent either in the past or in the future. We're thinking about what we miss, definition, what we miss. They're no longer there in our lives. We're reflecting back. We're missing all the things about them. They're important to us and special. And then we're thinking about the future, wondering, how am I going to manage now in my life with that person not being in my life? So we spend most of our attitude, most of our time, most of our thoughts in these 2 zones, and then we don't live in the present. And what I'm finding is that I believe it to be true, and it'd be great to hear from hearers, listeners about this. But if you did an evaluation right now, even in your own life, you say, okay, if I took a look at my day and looked at these 3 zones, what do I talk about most? Where do I spend all my time and energy? What am I thinking of? I think we'd be surprised that a lot of our energy and time is spent where? In the future. And the future is unknown. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't plan for the future. We have to do some planning. But I think we're missing out on life now and what it's saying to us. I'll talk about this later. That needs to happen right where we're at in the present now. That's where we need to spend our time. Difficult as that is, that's where healthy grief transition takes place, when you see what you have, not what you don't. And so fear of the future, I believe, is still a part of not only our choral community, but a lot of people's lives, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like fear and grief are kind of good friends.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the sun shone today, and those little kids went to the park.
Yes.
There were some good things.
Yes. And I saw, I just mentioned you're thinking about these kids coming home from Victoria. We live out in Colwood. We're driving by the school, the elementary school on the top of where we live, and it was very joyful to see all these little kids. It's elementary school, and their parents, mom, dads, partners, whatever, taking them home after school hand in hand. And I'm telling you, it just made me cry. I was so happy to see them together again, And
even the crossing guard was really excited.
Smiling. Yeah. But again, when you think probably Sunday night, they were all kind of living in that heightened state of that fear of the unknown and what's going to happen. And then by the time their kids are gone on Mondays.
Yes.
A bit of a time to breathe. Actually, one of the things we haven't talked about is, Erica, as you know, so many of our colleagues and our members of our choirs, particularly our more senior members of our choirs, live alone.
Yes.
So apart from the music and the singing, how do we keep our choirs functioning and that real stable core of community? How do we give them that essence of what they're missing?
Well, I mean, with Voices in Motion anyway, because our demographic is primarily seniors and people with memory loss and their caregivers. We do have friends and students in there as well. So, but, you know, in terms of speaking with those who maybe have more challenges technologically, although I'll get to that in a second too. But, you know, there are so many ways we've been trying to figure out how we could keep people engaged. But before I mention all those things, I want to read something brilliant. I just loved what Kelly Walsh from Shalloway Choir and Lady Cove choirs in Newfoundland. She had this amazing quote, and I went, she nailed it. It says, "If a choir is only about singing and performing, then there will be no choir for a while. If a choir is about teaching and learning, growing, connecting, community, cultural exploration and transmission, and innovating, we will find a way to have a choir." So I think it's out of that soil that we need to think about growing what we're doing right now in our programs. We have to figure out how to do that, you know, creatively. What we decided to do is we said, well, what do we do currently? And I'm going to speak specifically for Voices in Motion. I'm a wonderful group of singers with the Vancouver Island Chamber Choir, but for the moment, I'm going to focus on the Voices in Motion because of that age demographic. We thought, what have we done in rehearsals that we need to replicate currently in this COVID season? And so we thought about it, and we thought, well, at the end of every rehearsal, we've always had introductions, like a 5-minute time for a person to introduce themselves to the group so that we could get to know them, we would say. That's 5 minutes. What's your favorite food? What's your favorite color? How many kids do you have? Where did you used to live? Really, fast stuff. And we thought, well, we can expand upon that. And so we started something called Getting to Know You, and it's through Zoom on Saturdays. And we've signed up. I have months worth of choristers signed up because we give each person an hour. We started by having a few people on in the hour, and it's a full hour. And but we went, you know what? We're just not giving it justice. We're not giving these people the time that they need to really get to know them. So people are there, on Saturday afternoons, eating their lunch and listening to people's narratives, to their story, because everybody has a story that's important and powerful. And so this Getting to Know You Zoom thing has been amazing. And people have said, can we please continue this after COVID is done? So, and we're like, yeah, absolutely, because it's like one of the favorite things in the week.
For us, too.
For us. Absolutely. Absolutely. We love it. So, and we've got some powerful stories, inspirational stories from people that, as a result of doing that we wouldn't have otherwise done had we not done that. The second thing we all love as choirs, we love food, right? Whether we're at barbecues or whether we have snacks at break, we love food. So we thought, how can we replicate that? And we thought, well, we're pretty story driven. This guy's a narrative therapist, so stories, he's all about story. So how can we replicate that? Well, we're going to be putting out a Voices in Motion cookbook. So people will be sending in their favorite recipe that's meaningful to them, not just a recipe, but something that was important to them as a kid, or they always made this at a special occasion, and the story that goes with it, their picture, the picture of the meal, whether it's, back in the day when they had their family together or whatever. So, and then we'll have a section for healthy brain food. But we're going to put that together as a community and build that. If we haven't seen people for a while online, we connect through notes and writing letters, little notes, and through emails, phone calls. We want to make sure that they're okay. And I was always very impressed with Shackleton, the explorer to the Antarctic, and that on Elephant Island he lost. Well, his ship got stuck there, and he had to go and find help. But he left all the guys on Elephant Island for 10 months. And I'm thinking, through the winter, and when he came back, every single one of them was present and accounted for. And I think one of my goals is I really want everyone to be present and accounted for and okay when we come back, Yeah. So, one of the other things that we've been doing is Facebook sing-alongs. We take requests from people so that they can feel their voices heard, and we say, hey, this was requested by Dan, or this was requested, so that when they're listening on the Facebook Live, they can sing along. And these are, truly not professional or rehearsed. They're just fun.
These
and
are open to the whole world.
To the whole world. So we have people from France on there too sometimes. So it's great. It's been a lot of fun singing Skinnamarink Dinky Dink and everything else in between, and some Beatles tunes. As everybody, most people, we're having Zoom rehearsals too. And here's the cool thing. These people have been learning Zoom. Initially, it was like, how do I do, like all of us, right? Like, what do I click, And, but they've been really developing their skills, and it's really cool because this is a very affirming for them, right? To be developing these new skills, despite what they're having to live with in terms of memory loss and dementia. And it's just been, we're really proud of them for doing this. Something that we had before COVID ever was introduced, we have a Good Vibrations newsletter, we call it. It goes out once a month, and it gives people resources and opportunities, organizations. Personal stories are in there, the conductors are in there, special events coming up. So or videos that might be of interest to them. Something that we've always done is to just try to keep them connected. And I'm sick and tired of virtual choirs, but it's interesting. We tried it. We did a virtual choir for O Canada for the Walk for Alzheimer's, virtual walk, of course. And it meant that everybody had to learn, again, this new skill. They had their phone here so they could listen backup track, and their earbuds and their Zoom, they could record, and, they all did it. And again, a new skill acquired. Some of our students have really stepped up to the plate. We had one of our charter member students from 2 years ago. She actually for COVID, she developed a website called wiseandwellvic.com for an intergenerational website so that young people could help some of our older singers with different things that they needed to do. Right. Oh, I'm okay. Move it along, Erica. And we have one of our students who wrote a book about the choir called I Remember, and we're all really excited about her publishing. It's very exciting things happening. I know many of you are doing online hacks with each other. You're teaching theory to your students, you're teaching musicianship skills, one-on-one voice lessons, small group barbecues, sectionals, quartets. When we come out of this, I actually wonder if we're not going to be a stronger choral community and not a weaker one. I wonder if we're not going to have more people joining the choirs because they see the value of it, even from the online, virtual things they're seeing. And again, I just think we need to reach out to our teachers as well. Sorry, I think I've taken a lot of time and blabbed a lot, but those are some of the possible strategies.
I have a question. Like, that's a huge amount of stuff that you are doing with one organization. Are you working harder than you did when you went once a week in person?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. And one of the things too, when you were talking earlier about our sort of our heightened emotional state, I'm tired. Like, really, I'm doing squat compared to everybody else I know, but I'm tired. And that's part of that overload of all of the what ifs is that all part of it?
Yeah, and I think too, you have to understand that we have a lot of people involved in these choirs, so we have a lot of resources as well.
So she's not doing everything all by herself?
Yeah,
no.
Oh,
no.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm executive director, so I'm part-time. Erica's full-time, but we all have an excellent board, and we've tapped into the resources of the community and saying, hey, we need to work together here. What can you do to help lighten the load, and what can you do to keep the community together? So, yeah, I mean, this seems like maybe this is a lot, some of these things we are doing previously, so we didn't add it in, so it was just part of the ongoing process of connecting with people. So, but I'm going to talk a little bit later about doing the one thing, which we need to consider not to be overwhelmed in what we're doing.
Do you have anything to add to the things that Erica was talking about the what we are doing and what we can do in the present, from your point of view?
I think she's kind of mentioned it all. I mean, I think again,
Do you have a favorite?
do I have a favorite?
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited about Priscilla's book. I remember, since I'm a published author myself, obviously I wanted to encourage her to do that, and so it's a book about her experience in the choir, and so she wrote it as a school project, and she brought it to a choir to read to the choristers, and everybody was bawling because it's about them. It's a book about them.
Hear the story.
And I said, you know what, Priscilla, let's publish this. I'm not sure how to do that. I said, I'll help you, and Voice in Motion will help you. And so now it's a project that's become not just about her, it's about the whole choir. So people are anticipating this book, they're getting ready for it. And it's about the beauty of what's happening through the research, really. That music does have some amazing possibilities to help people to actually remember in ways that they've never experienced before, which many of you choral conductors already know the research. So I'm excited about that project because it's no longer just a single project. It's a community project that we're doing together. And so, people are contributing. They're finding that this is a way that they can support one another, as well as the cookbook, which is going to do that as well. So I really love that project. It's going to be great. So hopefully in a couple of weeks we'll have the book, and all of you out there can purchase it at. Anyways.
It'll be up on the screen in a moment.
Yeah.
But I think all of the things that we've talked about tonight just affirm for all of us that choir is so much more than singing. And it's those conversations that we often engage in with people who have never, entered the doors of this amazing world that is for us life and life affirming.
Yes.
Right now, part of it's missing, but there's still power, and there's energy even from a two-dimensional world. There's a lot of heaviness, and we've talked about that. But so, Rick, what are some of your examples from your grief counselor perspective, of things that we can do to lighten the grief that the choral world is collectively experiencing?
Yeah. So, as we've kind of talked about, here previously, we want to care for each other. I mean, to open up our lives to one another, but we have to remember that we have to care for ourselves too. In order to be effective with one another, we need to be healthy in our own transition. We impact each other. We really do, by what we say, by what we do, and it's a very important understanding of I always say that grief is not lived out in isolation. It kind of is right now. But what I'm trying to say is that a community is more than one, whatever that is. And so we impact each other. And so we have to get healthy ourselves. These strategies that I'm going to share with you are all scientifically proven in regards to, again, reducing the stress in our life in very practical ways. We know that people will be emotional in their response to grief. And so when people come in to talk to me, of course, I want to understand their feelings and understand where they're at in their life at that particular time. But I also know that intentional grief is important. There's things that we can add to our life. As things take something out of our life, what can we add to our life that will help us in reducing those cortisol levels to bring them some type of balance? So here's 5 quick strategies that you can start today in your home, right now, tonight. And here they are. Number 1, rest. Sleep well. People need to be able to have healthy sleep patterns. There are so many things going into our mind, and our minds, our brains need rest. There's no excuse for us now of coming home late at night from work. We're home. So what an opportune time now to create some healthy habits, some healthy rituals. It's amazing from a grief research perspective how helpful this is in reducing stress. Number 2, obviously, nutrition. Eat well. How are we eating? What are we eating? those things are important for us to consider during our grief response. As practical that is, it's necessary. Sometimes we eat things that we shouldn't and are not helping our bodies at all to adjust to a new, different life. Number 3, exercise. These are all practical. Again, I'm not sure if we can have too many excuses for not exercising now when we're home, isolated. We can still walk, we can still run, we can still do something that is contributing to our healthy transition by exercising our life. Number 4, play. There's lots of research that concludes that we can reduce those stress levels by just playing together. I would include music under this category, by the way. Music, I mean, we know that we need to add the healthy hormones into our lives. And these are all strategies that help this to be possible. The serotonin, the dopamine, the oxytocin, the endorphins, all those things that we need in our life come about doing these simple strategies. What is reducing the stress of our lives? So what are we doing for play? I mean, singing, I find it fascinating that you can't get a puzzle now. They're out of stock. So people are actually playing together.
Or a puppy.
Or a puppy.
Or a puppy.
Right.
Laughing together. Humor, again, is huge in grief transition. You don't want to be sad. Well, you want to be happy. So invite in these simple strategies into our life. And the 5th one, which is fascinating, is serve. When we serve, when we do something for somebody else, something amazing happens to reduce that stress level in our life. Now you think, well, I have to do more. I'm doing more now, right? Lots of research that indicates that when you reach out to somebody else, it's an effective way to reduce the stress level in our lives and involve ourselves in some type of healthy transition through grief. Simple strategies that really work. The other thing I just want to mention really briefly here, I think is important, that we have to begin to change the language of how we talk about our experience as well. And we talked about this whole kind of future-focused language that we use. We need to change our language from if we come back to when we come back. None of this if anymore. It's when we come back, this is what's going to happen. I can hardly wait for that experience. I'm curious what it'll be like. I'm going to be surprised by what will really happen when we meet together. So, think about it, the language that we hear from other people, how that impacts us, and how we can, in fact, as individuals, begin sharing a different language of more positivity. Kind of the whole thing of gratitude, really, right? Being thankful for what we do have again and not for what we don't have. That places us in a totally different position. And the final thing I think is really important in taking care of ourselves is to put up boundaries in our life on information that's coming into our life. I mean, there's so much negative information that is present, whether, I'm not saying we should stop listening to the news or going online, but I mean, if it's our go-to to feel happy, to feel energized, we're not going to get it from there. So put a boundary on how much time we actually spend going on to this media, what we're hearing. Also put a boundary upon perhaps people who are negative towards us, or at least teach them that we're not going there. See, it impacts us. Everything that coming into our life also impacts our grief experience. So I think it's really important, as I say to so many people, who do you want in your life? Who do you want maybe for the time being to be a little bit outside of your life? What kind of boundaries do you need to put into place so that you can begin to be happy again, to be joyful, to see what you have. Again, it's to see what do I have now that's really important to me still, that's really special, not what I don't have. So these are just, again, very simple strategies, but they work. And so taking care of ourselves, then we can begin to take care of one another. And finally, you mentioned it earlier, don't do too much. Try to do one thing well. Whatever it is, do the one thing well. And I think then we reduce the stress of our lives. Don't compare yourselves to other choirs. Don't compare yourself to other conductors. Just do one thing well, whatever you decide to do.
That's just so helpful. because we've talked about where we came from, and you've given us so much information and so many helpful strategies for how important it is to be and to experience the present, and that there is some joy every day. Because I was kind of feeling like we all in March got on a roller coaster that none of us bought a ticket for, and most of us are like really afraid of roller coasters. The future, like we don't know if it's going to go zooming up, zooming down, turn off the lights and it falls off the side. So when we're looking to the future, Rick, from your grief counselor's perspective, what can we do? And I think one of the things that is that the grief anticipatory. So September rolls around. You know, Erica's done all summer working to make the choir season go. The choristers open, you know, that smell of the new music in your folder when you open it. It's just like, September is usually so exciting. Like there's that euphoria. And if that doesn't happen, I keep sort of hearing, you know, Dr. Bonnie with her great shoes. And I have tinkered with my bangs, by the way. And she talks about the second wave of the pandemic. And I just think, what can we do not to anticipate grief, but what can we do to keep ourselves grounded? So if that subsequent loss happens and September is not a September that we have known before, how can we keep ourselves so that we don't feel like the roller coaster is going off the rails?
Yeah, we've done it once already. I mean, there's a concept in the grief world called historical antecedents. Basically, what that means, if you've gone through something before in your life and done it well, then you have a history of doing it again. You have some tools that you already have to face what's ahead that might be the same. And so even tonight, as we're talking about different strategies and different things that we put into place, we've done it. We've survived. And we'll survive again no matter what happens in our life because we have some experience now. We can actually say that we've gone through a pandemic and survived.
And we will have a new cookbook to make the next 84 nights worth of dinners.
Exactly. So that's one thing. Okay, so know that you have these tools already and put them into place. The second thing I think is really important for me is, to take time in the present to begin thinking. There's a concept called meaning making, which is really powerful in grief. It comes out of Viktor Frankl's work. He's the father of logotherapy, which is really a narrative kind of approach to grief. But what he says, and I think it's really powerful, speaking about his experience of being in concentration camps, 4 of them, by the way, and surviving. And he asked the question, how come some people were able to come out of that experience, and others weren't able to? They didn't survive. Besides being killed, I mean, some were able to. He came out of that experience, and he said, "This is what he discovered." He said that if you're able to make meaning of the suffering, if you're able to notice in the suffering what is important and significant, if you're able to have hope for the future, then you are able to face anything in the future. So there is making meaning that happens in the suffering. And we feel like we're kind of suffering now, right? Here's the key here, though. Making meaning involves each one of us putting on a different lens and looking closer and deeper for the hidden treasure that might be in the muck, that needs to be discovered. And this is an individual journey that each one of us go on. So we make meaning of this experience. We don't lighten the impact of it, but we try to enter into it and find, what is it saying to me? First of all, my life that I need to take notice of. Will it bring something to my life that I've never had before? Will something come about that's significant that will surprise me and allow me to come out better? And so making meaning is important to discover what is different. Never comparing. Our lives are going to be different, but different is okay too.
Yeah, thanks. Oh, let's finish up with Erica. Let's just switch that lens right around onto you and ask, what have you learned from your choristers?
Oh, so much, so much. My first thing that I learned is resilience. One of our choristers turned 100 in April, She was in a long-term care home, and nobody was there. Her family were out on the street. They held up a big banner that said, "Happy 100th birthday, Mom." And they were all along the street, and she was allowed to look at them and just see them and wave from the window. But when her daughter phoned her and before that and said, "Mom, we're not going to be able to have a celebration. We're not going to be able to, to have your sister, who's 103, come in from Saskatoon and celebrate with you." Yeah, right. Anyway, but her response is, "Oh, it's always something, isn't it?" And she's like, "But Mom, there's a pandemic. It's a world pandemic." She goes, "Oh, I remember it. Yeah, the Spanish flu. I remember that too. Yeah, there's always something, isn't there?" And so everything that, her daughter brought up to her was like, "Oh, yeah, there's always something, isn't there?" And just the resilience in her. I mean, this 100-year-old woman, was amazing. One of our choristers, he had pneumonia, not COVID in the middle, but he was in hospital. And it was when we had to do our virtual choir for O Canada. Well, he wanted to sing in that. So they brought the iPad into the right into his hospital room, and he sang Bagum, on that, and he's in that video, and you can see him. He's got tubes, but he's singing "O Canada," and I mean, the resilience just blows me away. The other thing they've taught me is to live in the present, because for many of our singers, that's what they've got. Life is a snapshot. It's not a video anymore. They've got that moment. So live, like Rick said, live in the present. Another thing I've learned is that to value people over music. I know that sounds like oh, but we love music, and it's so precious to us, and being excellent about in the performance of music is important. But I'm realizing that we got to value music was created for people. We've got to value people even over the music. Humor. Rick, we were talking about that as well, and just staying positive. I used to go to the WHO website every morning, and into the COVID news and the updates. I don't do that anymore. And instead, I go to a friend's website she posts a fabulous meme every morning that just makes me guffaw. So humor, and our people are in the choirs, whether have been they just make us laugh. They're a lot of fun. And then beauty comes in a lot of different forms, not just in music, but creating community is also beauty, and loving on your tribe is beauty. So just all these things that they've taught me. And I wanted to close by reading this fabulous poem. Mary Oliver is brilliant, and she wrote a poem called "I Worried." And this is what it says. "I worried a lot. Will the garden grow? Will the rivers flow in the right direction? Will the earth turn as it was taught? And if not, how shall I correct it? Was I right? Was I wrong? Will I be forgiven? Can I do better? Will I ever be able to sing? Even the sparrows can do it, and I'm hopeless. Is my eyesight failing, or am I just imagining it? Am I going to get rheumatism, lockjaw, dementia? Finally, I saw that worrying had come to nothing, and I gave it up. And I took my old body and went out into the morning and sang. So I think that wherever we are, we need to sing and love on our tribe.
All right. I consider that to be a triumph. Thank you very much, both of you, Rick and Erica, for spending time with us, for sharing your expertise and your obvious love and enthusiasm for the work. Please know that everybody here, of course, we all share in the experience, and we all share that same passion and energy you have. And Sandra, thank you for guiding the ship along through this conversation. It's good to sort of try to unpack what stress is doing to us. It's good to unpack what the grief reactions are that we're all having. I think that's all a lot of information, useful information for us to take away and contemplate. I want to, before we hang it up, I want to invite everybody to join us for our third town hall session. We will be talking about the sort of economic impact on choirs of what all of this lack of activity and cancellation is about. So There'll be a lot of creative solutions to what we need to do, some of the stuff we've touched on this evening. Also, though, just looking at what the landscape is at the moment for some choirs, small choirs, big choirs, community choirs, all of them. So please do join us. And there will be a recording of this particular session online very soon. Our faithful Andy Rice is going to create a lovely recording for you, so you'll be able to reference this. And please do share it with your friends. I think that's it for tonight. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you so much. Good night.